Hey everyone, welcome back to voxq. Today, we've got some wild ones. Grab a drink, settle in, and let's get into it. There is a specific kind of person who lies and then doubles down, not because they have a plan, because they have always gotten away with it before. They assume the other person will fold, the group will side with them, and the details will stay blurry enough to survive. What they never account for is the documentation, the voice memo still running, the contract sitting in storage, the bank transfer that never disappears. 3 people today forgot that receipts do not need to be found immediately to matter. They just need to exist. Let's get into story 1. Rowan and Vanessa had been together about 2 years when they started seriously talking about moving in together. From the outside, the relationship looked solid, but Rowan had been noticing small things, inconsistencies in timing, stories that did not quite line up, and a particular sensitivity from Vanessa anytime Rowan asked a direct question about her schedule. Vanessa had started telling people in their circle that Rowan was paranoid, controlling, that the questions were exhausting and coming from nowhere. And because Vanessa was warm and well-liked, people believed her. Rowan started feeling the shift at gatherings, the slight pause before people responded, the conversations that moved on a little too quickly. And this is where it gets worse. Rowan had left a voice memo running during a phone call with Vanessa a few months earlier, a call where Vanessa explained why she had been unreachable for most of a Saturday. At the time, Rowan had not thought much of it, just a habit of recording heavy conversations to process later. But after the paranoid narrative started spreading, Rowan went back and found it. The memo captured Vanessa's explanation in detail, a specific location, a specific reason. The problem was that Rowan had since found the ride history from that same month on a shared account, and the locations did not match. Not close, not a rounding error, a completely different part of the city on a completely different timeline. Here's what she did not expect. Rowan brought the voice memo and the ride history to a conversation with 2 mutual friends Vanessa had been telling the paranoid story to, played the memo, showed the history, let the gap speak for itself. One of them said out loud that this was not paranoia. That was the moment the narrative collapsed. Not in a dramatic confrontation, but in a quiet room where 2 people who had believed the wrong version suddenly had the right one in front of them. Vanessa's story did not survive the receipts. The moving in conversation ended, so did the relationship. That was the moment everything cracked. Now let's talk about Elijah, his brother Kara, and a car title that became the centerpiece of a family argument nobody was prepared to lose on record. Their father had passed earlier that year and left behind a modest estate. Lucas had been handling most of the logistics quietly, while Kara had been largely absent through the process. Then the lawyer showed up for the formal reading, and Kara showed up too, with a story. Kara told the family confidently and in front of the lawyer that their father had promised the car to them directly, a private agreement, a verbal understanding, and the title should transfer without question. The delivery was composed, almost rehearsed. Kara spoke like someone who had been preparing that sentence for a while. But it wasn't. What Kara did not know was that the storage unit contract, still active in the father's name, contained a handwritten inventory note made about a year before he passed, a personal record of his assets and his intentions for each one. Lucas had found it during an earlier visit to the unit and kept it without fully understanding its significance until that moment in the room. The note listed the car. It listed Lucas by name as the intended recipient, dated, signed in his father's handwriting, and specific enough that the lawyer immediately flagged it as relevant to the distribution. What happened next made it impossible to deny. Kara said the note did not reflect the most recent conversation, that things had changed after it was written. The lawyer asked if there was documentation of that change. There was not. The note stood. The car went to Lucas. Kara left the meeting without saying much else, a significant departure from the composed entrance they had made an hour earlier. Lucas told me the strangest part was not the outcome. It was watching Kara's posture change the moment the note came out of the folder. Before it, Kara had the room. After it, the room had Kara. Now let's talk about Elijah and Olive, because this one involves a freelance deposit, a move-out, and a version of events that fell apart the moment actual numbers had to be shown. Elijah and Olive had been business partners on a small creative project for about 18 months. When things started to deteriorate, Olive began reshaping the financial history in conversations with people in their shared professional network. The story Olive was telling was that Elijah had received a freelance deposit meant for both of them and kept it, that during a stressful move-out period, Olive had taken funds that were not solely his. It was a specific accusation, told with enough detail and emotion that it started moving through the network before Elijah even knew the version existed. And somehow they still thought they could talk their way out of it. Elijah found out through a colleague who reached out privately, confused because the story did not match what they had observed firsthand. Elijah pulled the bank transfer records for the entire collaboration, every deposit, every split, every outgoing payment. The records showed that the specific deposit Olive was referencing had been received, documented, and split within 4 days of arrival. Olive's share had been transferred with a transfer note referencing the project by name. Elijah did not post anything publicly, forwarded the relevant transfer records directly to 3 people in the network who had heard Olive's version, with a single note that said the documentation was available if anyone had questions. 2 of the 3 replied within the hour. The transfer records confirmed what some had suspected and corrected what others had believed. Olive's version stopped traveling after that. The professional relationships Olive had been using to spread the narrative quietly recalibrated. Elijah told me the records had just been sitting in the account history the whole time, not hidden, just there, the way financial records always are, waiting for the moment someone needed to look. And that's the thread connecting all 3 of these stories. Vanessa, Cara, Olive. Different relationships, different stakes, different audiences, same core mistake. They all built a version of events and delivered it with enough confidence that the people around them accepted it without asking for proof. And that works until it doesn't, until the memo plays, until the note comes out of the folder, until the transfer history gets forwarded. What made each of these exposures so complete was not aggression. Rowan did not confront Vanessa publicly. Lucas did not argue with Cara in front of the lawyer. Elijah did not send a call-out. In each case, the person who had been lied about simply produced the documentation and let it do the work. These were not careless liars. Vanessa had been running the paranoid narrative long enough to reshape how an entire friend group saw Rowan. Cara walked into a legal meeting with a rehearsed story and delivered it without flinching. Olive constructed a detailed financial accusation and moved it through a professional network. Calculated moves, they just didn't account for the possibility that the other person had access to the same reality they were rewriting. That's what documentation does. It doesn't get tired or second-guess itself. It doesn't wonder if it's being too sensitive. It just shows what happened. And once it's in the room, the version that required performance and social pressure to survive can't compete with the version that simply exists on a screen. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment and let me know which receipt hit hardest, the voice memo, the storage contract, or the bank transfers. New episode coming soon, and you won't want to be here for it.